This guy is about to die, and when it happens, he'll be replaced by something that looks exactly like him. Whatever that thing is, it's going to kill everyone he loves, including 700 people. And he needs to stop it. So, Shinpei Ajiro is riding the ferry back to his hometown of Hitogashima when, out of nowhere, his friend Ushio Kovane shows up. She jokes with him about how long he's been gone, but then her voice drops and she tells him to look after her little sister, Mio. And Shinpei doesn't understand what's going on, so he tries to reach for her. But before he can grab her, she just slips away and he slams into a woman. He quickly apologizes, but gets slapped in the face. So after that, the ferry finally docks. Shinpei's back in Hitogashima, and he's not here for vacation. He's here for Ushio's funeral. And right as he steps off the boat, a bike comes flying straight at him. It's Mio. She tries to hit the brakes, but they don't work, so she goes flying straight into the water. After helping her out, they catch up. Mio asks about his life in Tokyo and teases him about places like Shibuya, though Shinpei admits he hardly touches grass. As they're walking, she says something really strange. Sure, there are a lot of tourists coming to their island, but for some reason, she says sometimes even the people she knows feel like strangers. Well, they don't think much of it at first, but that feeling will be important later. At the funeral, Shinpei stands with people he's known his whole life. You see, Ushio is not just his friend, she was more than that. 10 years ago, when Shinpei's parents died in an accident, the Kofunes took him in. And ever since then, Shinpei treated them as family. And when he decided to move to Tokyo, the only thing he regrets is that when Ushio asked him to cook curry before he left, he promised he'd make it for her when he got back. But he never did. Then his friend, So Hishigata, comes forward, and he just can't hold back his feelings. So is overwhelmed with guilt because he couldn't pull Ushio out when she went in to save a kid. That kid was Shiori, who also attended the funeral. And she was so shocked from what happened that even now she hasn't spoken a word. And then Shinpei hears something that doesn't make any sense. He overhears people saying Ushio had an autopsy, which is weird because why would he even need that if Ushio just drowned? So he asks So, since his dad is the only doctor on the island. But So doesn't answer it at first. He just says he'll call Shinpei later with the details. After the funeral that night, something strange happens. Shinpei finally makes the curry he owes and eats with Mio and Alan. Outside, the one and only police officer on the island, Tetsu Totsumura, is walking past the house, and he notices Mio. She's standing at the window, staring in. But that's weird because Mio is inside the house, eating dinner with her family, so who's this girl? Now, So finally calls Shinpei and explains what his dad found. So says his dad was there when they examined Ushio's body, and he saw something really disturbing. Her body had marks on her neck. Strangulation marks. Meaning Ushio didn't drown. It was murder. And here's the part that is even stranger. The day she drowned, they were actually playing on a beach behind the elementary school. And nobody was there. No tourists, no strangers, just Mio, So, Ushio, and the other kids. So when she tried to save Shiori, and when Mio and So tried to follow them, they saw no one else. So if it was murder, who killed Ushio? While they're talking, Mio knocks on Shinpei's door and gives him Ushio's necklace. Then she just breaks down. She says she'll never forgive the person who did this. But a moment later, she wipes her face and says Ushio wouldn't want her to cry. And as she leaves the room, Shinpei can't hold it in anymore and finally breaks down crying. Now the next morning, things just get weirder. Alan opens his restaurant again. Shinpei throws himself into work. And while he's helping out around the place, a drunk customer stumbles in and asks Shinpei if he finally found the woman he was looking for. Shinpei is confused, like, what is this guy even talking about? The man explains that Shinpei supposedly asked him that morning about some lady with huge badonkers. But Shinpei never asked that. Maybe the guy's just drunk.
Good afternoon, sir.
But then it gets even stranger. Officer Tetsu shows up, and he says the entire Kobayakawa family, who, by the way, own the only convenience store in the island, has just vanished. Their shop never opened. Their house is empty, like they're really gone. So Tetsu theorizes that maybe they ran away because they had a huge debt. Well, whatever the case, Mio suddenly panics and runs outside. But the thing is, when she does that, why does Tetsu look so irritated? So Shinpei chases her. That's when she finally says it. Shiori told her, before Ushio died, that she saw someone that looked exactly like her. And ever since then, Shiori felt like someone was always watching her. Then a hunter named Ginjiro Nezu overhears them. He says that the thing Shiori saw was called a shadow. So Nezu starts telling them this strange, creepy story that people on the island have been whispering for years. They call it shadow sickness. If you see someone exactly like you, you're marked to die, and that copy will take your place and then slowly kill your entire family. And those afflicted were always taken to the shrine. To make that even worse, Mio explains that 3 days before Ushio died, they both saw Ushio's own shadow. And Shinpei is really worried because this is too much of a coincidence, and they're both freaking out. But he calms down and decides that they should go to the shrine, just like what Nezu suggested. And as they head there, Mio suddenly freezes, staring at something behind the trees. And it looks like Shiori. So they run after her. And as they're looking for her, they hear gunshots. Following the sound, Shinpei finds the woman from the ferry lying on the ground, bleeding out. She's trying to say something, a warning. But before she can finish, she gets shot by Mio. But the thing is, she's also holding the real Mio at gunpoint. And right in front of Shinpei, she kills her, then shoots him as well. Then Shinpei found himself at the beach where Ushio died. He sees So desperately trying to resuscitate her. But the next thing Shinpei knows, he snaps awake, smacks his face into the same woman he met before, and just like last time, he's back on the ferry. And again, she slaps him. This time, though, she pauses and asks if he's alright, because from the look in his face, it seemed like he just had a nightmare. Shinpei recognizes her as the woman from the forest, and almost without thinking, he blurts out if she's ever been shot with a gun. That just makes her stare at him like he is crazy. At this point, Shinpei checks his phone. It's July 22nd, but in his memory, he clearly recalls going to Hiruko Shrine with Mio on the 23rd. So now he's thinking back to a book he had been reading, Swamp Man. It was a horror story about a girl convinced that her family and friends were being replaced by copies. And Shinpei convinces himself that maybe that's where this nightmare came from. He must have fallen asleep while reading it. But once the ferry docks, things only get weirder. Shinpei is hit with this overwhelming sense of déjà vu. Like he's already lived this exact moment before. And sure enough, Mio greets him in the same way and even falls into the water again. Only this time, Shinpei notices something he didn't see before. The brake line on her bike had been cut. At Ushio's funeral, the day plays out exactly the same as before. Memories, flashes, details all begin to stack up until Shinpei starts to wonder if the old legend of shadows might actually be real. Later that night, after cooking curry, he steps outside to clear his head. He can't stop replaying Mio's near accident and wondering, did someone actually try to kill her? And that's when he overhears Officer Tetsu. The man is looking straight at Mio, standing outside the house. But inside, Mio is already at the dinner table. And what happens next horrifies him. The Mio outside suddenly lunges at Tetsu, stabbing him over and over with a kitchen knife. Shinpei looks up because this isn't Mio at all. This is her shadow. Then, right before his eyes, a second figure peels itself out of Shadow Mio's shadow and takes on Tetsu's form. The new Tetsu kneels over the real officer's corpse. There's a blinding flash of light, and just like that, the body disintegrates. At this point, Shadow Mio calmly tells the new figure that from now on, he is Officer Tetsu Totsumura. She even demands his gun. That's when it hits Shinpei. She still hasn't killed the real Mio. Shadow Mio admits her attempt earlier in the morning failed. She says next time, she'll just try to force Mio into the hospital where killing her will be easier. But for now, she's just scouting. And right then, Shinpei's phone buzzes. It's So, calling him like he promised earlier. The vibration gives him away. Shadow Mio hears it, she turns, finds him, and drives a knife straight into his neck. As Shinpei bleeds out, Tetsu wonders if she'll copy him too. But Shadow Mio mutters something strange. That Shinpei is already different. He can't make out the rest. Moments later, Shinpei feels himself leaving his body, floating. Then he hears Ushio's voice. She tells him to be careful. She tells him to protect Mio. And in the blink of an eye, Shinpei wakes up. July 22nd, again! He steps off the ferry. Only this time, Mio comes racing down on her bike. He steps in front of her. The collision knocks him into the water, and since he can't swim, Mio dives in to pull him out. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the island, Hizuru, the woman with glasses, records herself while hanging upside down from a tree. She talks about how long she's been here, what she's eaten, and how hanging upside down helps her think. She keeps watch on Shiori, noting that it is moving among the people, and promises to keep observing. That evening, Shinpei takes precautions. He tricks Tetsu with a fake report to lure him away, deleting apps on his phone for space, setting it up to record outside the house. Later, he notices something new. His right eye has changed color. He doesn't know when it happened. And worried about Mio, he tries checking on her in the bathroom. But when he peeks in, he gets blasted in the face with a shower head. But the next morning, Shinpei retrieves his phone. He shows Mio the recording, and what she sees absolutely terrifies her. On the screen is someone who looks exactly like her, standing outside her window, silently watching. And it's not just standing there, it's there to kill her. Now shaken, the two of them start talking. Shinpei remembers Ushio once said she saw someone who looked exactly like her too. And that's when it clicks. Ushio's death wasn't some tragic accident. It wasn't just a human crime either. Ushio was killed by a monster. Shinpei confides in Mio that he's seen a shadow copy someone. Mio suggests they talk to Shiori, since she once saw her double too. But Shinpei shuts her down.
But wait.
He doesn't want to risk her safety and insists on going alone. So he heads over to Kobe Mart. But when he gets there, the place is shut tight. And right then, Shiomi shows up, just as surprised as he is to see it closed. They ring the bell, no answer. But the door creaks open, and so Shiomi steps inside with Shinpei following right behind her. And what they find is very unsettling. The TV is still on, the dinner table is covered with untouched food, but the whole house is silent. Nobody's there. While Shiomi pokes around, Shinpei notices something that makes his stomach drop. Black stains on the floor. The same kind he saw when Shadow Tetsu killed the real one. At this point, he realizes the family must have been attacked in the middle of dinner. And when he looks closer, he sees dents pressed into the floorboards. The stains are adult-sized, which means Shiori could still be alive. So Shinpei bolts upstairs, desperate to find her. On the second floor, he tries the light switch, but then a sudden flash behind him. Shiori is standing there, staring. And then she asks him a chilling question. Why did he ask her yesterday if she had seen someone that looked like her? Before he can answer, she presses again. Why is he looking at her like something is wrong? And that's when it hits Shinpei. This isn't Shiori. This is her shadow. And she was at Ushio's funeral too. Which can only mean one thing. The real Shiori is already dead. Right as he processes this, a second shadow begins to rise. Shinpei realizes that the flash he saw earlier already marked him with shadow sickness. Overwhelmed, he pulls back. Moments later, Shadow Shiori slips away into the dark. Afterwards, Shinpei calls the police to report the missing Kobayakawas. But at this point, he knows he needs to think ahead. Maybe this time he can save the woman with glasses. So he starts searching. Inns, guest houses, anywhere she might be staying. But nobody's seen her. And when he asks Nakamura, the man just shrugs. He gets plenty of visitors. Struggling to describe her, Shinpei blurts out that she's the one with the large bust. And right then, Nakamura knows exactly who he's talking about. He explains she only ever stopped by his coffee shop. At this point, Shinpei realizes this connects perfectly to what Nakamura will drunkenly ask him later. Did you find her yet? Back at Kovan's diner, Shinpei runs into Tetsu. The officer is about to grill him about the fake fight report, but Shinpei cuts him off and casually asks if he wants the usual. And this time, Tetsu says the Kobayakawas are missing, and a detective from the mainland will be arriving that evening. The way he says it convinces Shinpei. This is the real Tetsu, not a shadow. And then Tetsu hands him a phone. Mio recognizes it instantly. It's Ushio's. Tetsu explains she gave it to him the day before she died, telling him to pass it on to Shinpei if anything ever happened to her. Wait, does that mean Ushio already knew she was about to die? Not long after, So shows up, and Shinpei finally tells him the truth. Mio is the next target. So asks if there's any way to spot a shadow, but Shinpei admits he doesn't know. Mio suggests going to Hiruko Shrine. Shinpei pushes back. He doesn't want to risk running into the shadow Mio there. At this point, So reminds him tomorrow is the summer festival, the busiest day of the year. The priest won't have time for them. But Shinpei argues that a crowded shrine might actually be safer. Eventually, So agrees. Before they split, So suggests they come up with a code. Mio jokes that it should be something from Mesopotamian culture. Later, on the way home, it starts to rain. And while they're waiting it out, Mio quietly asks how long Shinpei will be staying. She admits she kind of wishes he would never leave. Then she hands him the seashell necklace Ushio always wore, saying she'd be happy if he kept it. The next day, Shinpei still can't figure out how to unlock Ushio's phone. So, Tokiko and Mio come to get him for the festival. Shinpei presses So about what he wanted to check yesterday. So brushes it off. Nothing. At the festival, Shinpei walks with So and confesses he once promised to protect Ushio, but failed. So tells him it wasn't his fault, but now Shinpei has to protect Mio. And if he doesn't, So will. That's when Shinpei realizes So still has feelings for Mio. And right then, Mio joins them. She asks what they're talking about. Panicking, So blurts out they were arguing over butts versus boobs. Mio stares at Shinpei suspicious. He scrambles to explain that wasn't the real topic. Tokiko, smirking, brings up the time Shinpei walked in on Mio in the bath. She pushes him about his feelings. Shinpei insists. He cares for her, but only as a family. His fireworks explode overhead. So remembers his father said the priest would be free once the show ends, and they could finally go in. But not a moment later, Shinpei suddenly spots someone familiar in the crowd. and without thinking, he chases her through the festival down to the beach. And there, standing in the water, is Ushio. So Shinpei could not believe what he was seeing. I mean, his friend? Alive? Before he can even process it, she runs to him and throws her arms around him, overjoyed that he's back. But Shinpei shoves her away, blurting out that she's supposed to be dead. If she's here, then that could only mean she's a shadow. But Ushio is acting strange. She's clearly just as confused as Shinpei, and she keeps insisting she's alive. At this point, Shinpei presses her on what she remembers. Ushio tries, but she can't recall much. Slowly, she realizes she really did die. She even wonders if she might be a ghost. He explains that right before it happened, she had one wish: to see Shinpei one more time. Shinpei can't comprehend what's happening. The way she talks, the way she acts, it makes him start to believe that maybe Ushio really did come back. But what she says next almost makes him lose his mind. She says there was something she wanted to tell him if they ever met again. That she loved him. Shinpei stumbles a bit, but forces himself to stay calm, not wanting to be fooled. He asks what she wants now. Ushio looks up at the fireworks and asks if it's already the 24th. When Shinpei nods, she admits she wanted to go to the festival with him. At this point, Shinpei realizes she doesn't even believe she's a shadow, so he follows her to the festival. People are staring at her until Shinpei pulls her away to hide. He tells her she can't be seen, because everyone thinks she's dead. Ushio, annoyed, punches him, warning that if he keeps talking nonsense, she'll hit him again. That moment shakes Shinpei, because that's exactly what the real Ushio would have done. The two talk more, and Ushio recalls their childhood memories, and it's clear she remembers everything. Well, everything except shadows. Then Shinpei's phone rings. It's Mio. Ushio snatches it and answers cheerfully. Mio freezes in shock, but Shinpei quickly covers, pretending it's him and that Mio is just imagining things. Mio says the fireworks are over, and they're heading to the shrine. Shinpei promises to come, telling Ushio to stay hidden until he returns. So, Shinpei joins Mio, So, and Tokiko at the shrine where the Omiokuri ritual is beginning. Now, on Hitogashima, people believe anything that washes ashore carries the spirit of Hiruko no Mikoto, the god of fishing. During the summer festival, they gather the debris and burn it, sending the god back to sea. But while the crowd watches, So pulls Mio aside. Tokiko whispers to Shinpei that So is about to confess. Though she doubts it'll work, Mio already likes someone else. Shinpei asks who, but Tokiko won't say. Moments later, So admits to Mio that he loves her and wants to protect her. Mio, kind but firm, says she wants to stay friends. So, bro got friend-zoned. And right then, Ushio suddenly appears, wearing a poor disguise, trying to lighten the mood. But it doesn't fool anyone. People recognize her instantly. She tries to deny it, but finally admits she just wanted to see them again. Mio is horrified, insisting it isn't Ushio at all, but a monster. She begs Shinpei to stay away. Shinpei refuses. He clutches Ushio, who cries out in pain. That's when it dawns on him. She isn't trying to replace anyone. She has no intention of killing anyone. But not a moment later, something horrifying happens. A shadow peels away from Shinpei himself, and in stunned silence, everyone realizes Shinpei is a shadow too. So here's what actually happened. 10 minutes earlier, on his way to the shrine, Shinpei had run into Shadow Mio. She had just killed someone. She grabbed him, demanding to know how he could have recorded her unless he already knew she was coming. Shinpei looked down. The ground was littered with black stains, proof she'd killed many. She asked if the traitor told him, warning that their plan was nearly finished and she couldn't allow interference. And then, out of nowhere, a shadow version of Shinpei appeared. It asked him how many times he'd already died, then unleashed a blinding flash. That's when Shinpei understood. The Flash at Shiori's house had created a copy of him with all his memories, and this new Flash would now update everything. Shadow Mio tried to kill him, but Shadow Shinpei stopped her, explaining that killing him was pointless. He would just reset again. He told her that Shinpei couldn't control the resets, but if he kept looping back to the 22nd, eventually he'd become a problem. He ordered Mio to take Shinpei's phone and send others after Ushio. Then he walked toward the shrine. Shinpei tried to stop him, but Shadow Mio snapped his arm with ease, mocking his resistance. She told him it was useless. Mother would soon wake up. When Shinpei kept struggling, she considered breaking his leg too. But right then, she gets shot in the head. And standing there is the lady from the ferry. But right as he processes that, he realizes Mio has vanished. Her body flattens into a dark smear that slides along the ground behind the woman. And not a moment later, Shadow Mio erupts upward, blade in hand, going straight for the kill. But the woman sidesteps at the last second and fires into the shadow beneath her feet. Caught off guard, Shadow Mio falters, collapses, and dissolves into nothing. At this point, the woman finally speaks. She says she hasn't been back to Hitogashima since childhood. She introduces herself as Ryunosuke Nagumo, though most know her as Hizuru, and tells Shinpei she came here to save him. Shinpei recognizes the name instantly, but before he can respond, she yanks him aside because a shadow is on its way. Moments later, Ushio comes running up the steps. Shinpei bolts forward to meet her, but Hizuru stops him cold. She warns that's exactly where the shadows are gathering. And that's when Shinpei asks the question in his mind. Can she really tell humans apart from shadows? Izuru explains that what looks human is just a shell. The real body is the shadow at their feet. Step on it and only a shadow will react. She adds that, according to her sister's theory, shadows scan humans with light, copy their data, and survive by feeding on it. But taste? Taste requires consuming the real person, leaving behind those black stains. And no matter how many she kills, more just keep coming. Clearly, they're building towards something. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupts at the top of the hill. Shinpei begs Hizuru to help. He has to save Mio. They sprint up the stairs and find Tokiko crying, only to watch her cut down by a shadow. Behind it looms a pile of human corpses. Shinpei freezes. His body can't move under the weight of how insane the sight is, but his eyes start counting shadows anyway. But then, he sees something even more horrifying. His best friend So? A copy of himself slamming an axe into the real So as he desperately tries to shield Mio. Shadow So lifts his weapon again, but Hizuru blasts his hand apart before the strike can land. At this point, the huge shadow splits and forms a female shape holding a gun, and it shoots at Hizuru. Hizuru sees herself dying an instant before it happens. She dodges, but the bullet still tears into her arm. That's when it clicks. This must be the parent shadow. The parent seizes Shinpei, and its gaze locked on his right eye, and Shinpei realizes with horror it matches the eye their mother once lost. Somehow he has it. The parent calls him a hero, saying he can restart from a save point each time he dies, while their demon king can only win by cutting the power. Then it proves its point, devouring the corpses and offering them to Mother as fuel. A crimson light floods the sky. Mother materializes, spreading across the island like a wave, consuming everything it touches. At the hospital, Sato watches the glow with a shadow at his side, muttering that she's recovered by feasting on thousands of humans. Hizuru turns to Shinpei, apologizing. She should have believed the warning earlier. But Shinpei says it isn't over. Not if he dies and loops again. He begs her to shoot him. The parent lunges. Shinpei braces for the end. But right then, Ushio bursts forward and punches it away. Hizuru looks at Shinpei one last time. If you really can come back, find me. Say my name. And then she pulls the trigger. Shinpei is ripped out of his body, floating above the island. Below him, the land is drowning in shadow. A glowing red girl appears, her eyes locking on him. Then Ushio's voice cuts through the void, warning him his power has limits, and everyone dies at the festival. And just like that, Shinpei jolts awake. July 22nd, back on the day he first returned. But this time, something feels different. Each loop pushes the starting point forward, and sooner or later, he'll run out of chances. Meanwhile, Ushio awakens again, washed up on the beach. When Hizuru first arrives on Hitogashima, she nearly steps on the man's shadow. But then, the shadow shifts out of the way on its own, and instantly, Hizuru realizes what that means. The man is a copy. Suddenly, the cryptic message she'd received doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. Not long after, she spots a girl, Mio, calling out to someone named Shin. She wonders if that could be Shinpei Ajiro. Checking her phone, she notices a funeral notice for Ushio Kofune. The Kofune name is familiar, and that's enough to push her towards the service. But what she finds there will only deepen the mystery. At the funeral, Masahito Karikiri recognizes her even after 14 years. Suspicious, Hizuru deliberately steps on his shadow. When it doesn't react, she knows he isn't one of them. Their small talk turns sour when he needles her about what she's been doing all these years. Before it gets worse, Alan, the man running the Kofune restaurant, joins in. Hizuru reveals her name, and instantly, Alan remembers. The middle school girl who used to tell stories to Ushio. The timing is eerie. Alan gets a call from Mio saying she and Shinpei fell into the ocean and would be late. Hearing Shinpei's name, Hizuru asks about him. And Alan explains he's the son of his best friend who died in a boating accident a decade ago. Suddenly, Hizuru realizes the boy she'd glimpsed earlier wasn't just anyone, it was Shinpei himself. For now, she decides to keep her distance. But Alan lowers his voice and confides something darker. Ushio's body had marks around her neck. When Hizuru asks if they checked under her nails for DNA, the answer is no. And then, almost casually, Alan admits the scene reminds him of another tragedy, Ryunosuke's death years back. That's when Hizuru makes her move. She goes back to Ushio's coffin and inspects the body herself. The marks are there. She asks who dressed Ushio, and Alan names a nurse from Hishigata Clinic. Before leaving, Hizuru pointedly asks, did Ushio ever mention seeing her double? Then an old acquaintance steps in, Asako Izukane. She says Ushio died saving her daughter, Shiori. But as Hizuru glances down, her blood runs cold. Asako's shadow is shifting unnaturally. The rest of the Kobayaka was standing there, pretending to mourn. Hizuru's rage spikes because they are all shadows. Later, she confides in Nezu. He warns that some shadows can reproduce. Hizuru connects the pieces. One must have drowned Shiori, erased her, then posed as her before wiping out the entire family. She gives Nezu a second phone, telling him to contact her if it rings. Meanwhile, Shinpei arrives at the funeral. He starts repeating questions that he remembers, subtly testing those around him. When he warns Shiori to avoid her double, Asako overhears. Shinpei brushes it off, but then he noticed something horrifying. An ant crawls across Asako and her husband's shadows, and both shadows move to avoid it. Shinpei realized that they're already shadows. The tension only grows. Later, Mio comes to him. Shinpei blurts out a bizarre question. Yesterday, was she wearing white panties? Shocked, Mio admits yes, but today she's in blue and white stripes. To Shinpei, that confirms it. She was copied. And elsewhere, her shadow double proves it, creating another copy using Alan's memories and digs through them. Nothing. Even Alan doesn't know where Ushio is. By 1:30 p.m., Ushio's coffin is gone to the furnace. Everyone gathers for a meal. Shinpei, still unsettled, decides to probe the others. Casually, he asks if they have ever heard of shadow sickness, or seen a certain woman on the island. Alan points him to Hizuru, and even hands him a note she left earlier. Shinpei realizes it's a cipher written in the style of her book, Adrift. When he decodes it and dials the number, Nezu answers, and suddenly, things accelerate. At Nezu's instruction, Shinpei returns alone to the hall. Nezu orders him to stand still, then fires directly at his shadow. At the very same time, Alan excuses himself to use the restroom. Hizuru follows. He slips a maintenance sign on the stall, waits, and then her gamble pays off. A shadow Alan enters. Before it can strike, Hizuru smashes it with a hammer, killing it instantly. Once convinced Shinpei isn't a copy, Nezu takes him to the old battery. There he explains, to crack Hizuru's code, you'd need to know her real name, Ryunosuke Nagumo. And no one else should know that, which means if Shinpei solved it, he isn't a shadow. And then Hizuru herself appears. Shinpei hands her a copy of Swamp Man and asks her to sign it with his name, Shinpei Ajiro. Hizuru studies him, then says the words that shocked him. This isn't the first time you've lived through July 22nd. You've repeated it, over and over. Shinpei breaks down in tears and admits she's right. He is a time traveler.